Because we do what we do.
What we do. All right, you guys, we will get the show started here in just a few minutes, but thank you all for joining us. Go ahead and like, share, invite somebody in. Haven't heard from Dak, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but right, you guys, we will get the show started here in just a few minutes. Need to turn the volume down on that. But I got a Fort Stewart, my old stomping grounds. Dax and I, when we were in the Army, they actually had tornado warnings today. Fort Stewart and Wright Army Airfield out in that area today. So hoping those guys are okay out there. I still got friends down that way. But those of you coming in, if you can like, share, definitely appreciate it. Oh, everybody want to be quiet now? Usually everybody's all talkative and saying hey, and
maybe it's because I'm on here. I don't know.
I know I behave right now.
No, you know how it is once you hit that live button right there.
Everybody tries to be good.
Danny, that has never stopped you before.
And the show has started.
Yep.
Steve, how did your guys' loot die repeat go this week?
It's funny you asked this week. I died.
You died this week? Oh, okay.
I died. So here's a small rundown. One of our team members in a dungeon previously got chosen correctly in a trap, and a demon was absorbed inside of him. And this past week, the rest of us had to go inside and defeat this demon, or it was going to take him over. Well, in that fight, I got murdered and thrown over the edge into oblivion. And but I think they're going to save me this week coming up. I know this was the most important topic we'll talk about this week, but
See, Steve,
sorry, it was such a short little summary.
See, Steve, you were dipping when you should have been diving.
For those of you that don't know, Steve is involved with a group, a D&D group that they stream on Twitch and YouTube, or they post it on YouTube. You don't do live on YouTube, right? It's live on Twitch.
No, sir. You got to do one live because the rest don't like you sharing live with others.
So you do
live on Twitch. We post
live on Twitch and post on YouTube. Loot, die, and repeat. The gaming. There's how many of you?
We have 7, and the Dungeon Master.
It's a good time for those of you that are into the game and into that environment. It's a good time, and they do a pretty good job with the storytelling and the interaction between the group. It's pretty cool. But those of you that are coming in, we appreciate you coming in and joining us. Like, share. We are going to take a minute tonight, and we are going to do our best to try to highlight Women's History Month, here in the month of March. Definitely want to take that time and highlight that. We think it's important. And so we wanted to take a minute tonight and do that. Few of the other gentlemen in the group felt it was important that we had someone other than men on the show in order to do that this evening. So we have a guest with us, Miss Michelle Robinson. She is a teacher here in the Olean City School System, and we are going to allow her to, I hope they save you, allow her to kind of share her unique experiences within the school system, her triumphs, her come ups, her frustrations, her struggles, that type of thing, and how she's contributed to women's history, has contributed to her path as well. And I think it's important that we recognize that constantly evolving. History isn't something that we just learn, but it's something that we make on a daily basis, and we all have the ability to have. So again, for those of you that are just coming in and joining us, like, share, invite somebody in. With that being said, not quite sure where Dax is tonight. I haven't heard from him since earlier today, but we are going to try to be as interactive as possible tonight. Definitely appreciate it. And Michelle, go ahead and take the floor.
So hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Robinson. I've been teaching for 14 years. I teach kindergarten at Washington West and Olean, and I've been teaching kindergarten the entire 14 years. I grew up in Friendship with my mother. After I graduated high school, I moved to Olean to live with my father, went to college. I've been married for 26 years, have 2 children, and have enjoyed my time teaching kindergarten, frustrated with a few things. One, I'm the only African-American teacher in the Olean City School District. We do, however, have our support staff or teacher aides. We have 10 African-American teacher aides, but those individuals don't directly teach children and impact them because their role is different from mine. Sometimes I meet a lot of resistance with people because I just don't feel like I'm understood, if that makes sense. Like they say they don't see me as different, but then in conversation, they say things that are offensive. And so I've dealt with a lot of racism, even though people say racism doesn't exist in Olean or in our schools. That's not true. I've dealt with that. I've had students removed from my classroom because their parents didn't want them in my room because of the color of my skin. I had a little girl in my room. Her father was very racist, and the principal I had at the time, she kept myself safe and the child safe and did not remove the child from my room. And then the father just wasn't allowed, for other reasons, to come to the school anyway. So I was happy that she stood her ground. But then after she left, there were other incidents where it just, if the parents didn't want their kids in my room, then they were removed from my classroom. And when I tried to explain it to my peers or my coworkers, what happened and how it bothered me, they just didn't get it and they didn't understand it. And even till this day, when stuff happens, it's like, I try to explain it and they still feel like I don't have a legitimate reason for feeling that way. And what I always say is, you don't understand it because you don't experience it. So I've been trying to educate the people I work with, sometimes some of the parents that I work with. And for the most part, I hear good things out in the community about when I've had somebody's child, or if somebody's child's coming into my classroom, they'll compliment me on, oh, my cousin's daughter was in your class. Or so when I hear stuff like that, that makes me feel good, because for the most part, I've always had like a negative, like not wanting their kids, not wanting their kids in my room. And that's one of my anxieties I have when I get my class list in August and we have Meet the Teacher Night, is meeting the parents, because I don't know what that's going to be like. When most of the parents know my name, they know that I'm African American, but those that don't, how am I going to be received by them? Is it going to be a good year, or is it going to be one of those years where they may not be in my room because of how a parent feels? So, but like I said, that hasn't happened in a few years. I do have a different administrator now, but it definitely has been an issue. So, and I'm also working currently with another, she's a counselor, to bring diversity training to the Olean City School District. Because number one, when you have people who say racism doesn't exist, or I'm not racist, but, and they're educators, then we have a problem. And I've always felt this way, but I've never felt like I had the support to move forward with it and the backing. And I also cared about my job, not that I don't care about my job, but I cared about how it was going to affect me. And now I just have a different mindset and frame of mind where this is what my mission is, and I'm going to complete that mission. So.
The comment
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
The
I'm
comment
sorry.
I just messaged to everyone in our group here is, "Damn, you are a trailblazer." I just thank you for going through all that for everyone in the city and for the kids there. I went to Washington West for all of elementary school. I presume you probably replaced Mrs. Morgan, which I had as a kindergarten teacher, since she stopped 14 years ago. So
I'm in her classroom.
So that's awesome.
My daughter had her.
That is awesome. Anyway, thank you for doing that for all the kids in town. I mean, I know you're doing it for them, because that cannot be an easy thing to go through. And I wouldn't do it for another adult, but I would do it for any kid anywhere. Right. I'm sure that's what's in your mind. And I'm sure you're doing it for yourself. I'm sure there are other questions, but in reference to getting the position and how you are interacted with and who you interact with professionally, clearly race is part of the equation. Is being a woman also part of the equation that you can bring up tonight?
In the education field, the majority of the teachers are female, at least in our area. But for me, it was a huge accomplishment growing up with my mom, low income, something that I'm proud of that I achieved. And not only being a woman, but a Black woman, so that other African-American girls or young Black girls see that they can make a difference if they just try or have the right supports that they need. There's like, I even did a diversity video with St. Bonaventure and one of my interns, because I used to take interns from St. Bonaventure, and to try to because Bonaventure wanted to recruit minorities to their education program. And it's on YouTube. I think it's called St. Bonaventure Diversity Video, but I have shared that video with students who I've had in my class who come to do like government internship hours. And some of them have decided to go into teaching, others haven't, but they also know that they can still accomplish the same type of things that I did. So,
Michelle, a lot of times people sit back, and for their job and their security and things like you did, things like you said from, the beginning, and then all of a sudden the switch flips, right? Where you're like, oh, I feel comfortable now to stand up and really speak on the things that I believe in. And me being in the corporate world, I find a lot of times females themselves sit back and they really sometimes don't really speak on what they believe on until they're really comfortable and secure in their future, in their job. What was that switch for you? What flipped that switch for you as a young Black woman? What made you go from, what, I'm secure, and now it's time to make a change. Now it's time to make that leap.
So I've always been the type to tell somebody how I feel. And when I first started teaching, I used to hear, oh, you better be careful, you're not tenure yet. Those were the words that I would hear. You better be careful, you shouldn't say anything, you're not tenure yet. And I understood that, but still I also believed what I believed, and I would speak up for myself. So I would say it was probably 2009. So I actually wasn't even tenure yet when I started speaking my mind and giving my opinion and feeling like I needed to be heard, because I was a non-traditional student at Bonas. So when I became a teacher, I wasn't a teacher like 21, 22 years old. I was in my 30s. So I had already had my way about me, and I was just sick of sitting back and listening to, oh, you better wait till your tenure, because so many things were happening that I felt like I needed to stand up for myself and protect myself. So it was probably 3 years into my teaching career before I received tenure that I spoke up, and I'm still there. So
I kind of have a two-part question. And the first one is, why kindergarten? And that's going to kind of lead into my next question,
okay.
which is somewhat loaded, just to be honest. But with that being said, why kindergarten?
So when I applied for the job, actually, the story behind how I did receive my job, I waitressed at Premier Banquet when I was in college, and the superintendent at the time, Mark Ward, was there for some event. I'm not even sure what it was. And he came to me and he approached me and he said to me, I know that you are going to school to be a teacher. I've seen you at Washington West volunteering in classrooms, and when you graduate, I want you to apply. So I applied for the job. He approached me twice at the banquet center on different occasions about this. So I applied, and not many people are certified to teach kindergarten. So they had a kindergarten position open, and I was certified, and that's how I landed in kindergarten. I have since tried to change grade levels, but a previous administrator always had an agenda. So she knew she wanted to give the job to somebody else. She knew I wanted to change, and she had asked me if I wanted to change, had me apply, went through the whole interview process, and then she gave it to somebody else. But then tried to put me into third grade. And at the time, Aaliyah it was her freshman year at Arizona State. So at that time, it was like I was going there to help her get situated at school. And then I wanted to have time to prepare to go to a different grade level. And that just wasn't the right time for me.
Okay.
So that's why I'm in kindergarten still.
All right. So now, part of the question. So we've talked about it a couple times on the show before, whereas essentially, you know, we've kind of kicked it around. When was the first time you could remember, for us, you know, we asked the first time we could remember having anything other than a white teacher? What grade was it? What level? You know, and for most of us, it was college. You know, before I had my first, you know, instructor or professor that was anything other than white, it was when I was in college, that I, you know, really thinking about it. And so, you know, I'm kind of thinking to myself here as you're talking, as impressionable as children are, and we talk about the younger they are, oftentimes is a better time to reach them. Do you think that it is more impactful for them to have a teacher of color at a younger age, or at a mid or a high school level, for that to be their first experience?
That's a good question, because when I went to school, I didn't have a teacher of color at all, not even in college. So I feel like the younger they are, the better, but I feel like they need to see more teachers of color throughout their school career.
Agreed.
However, in this day and age, I feel like the middle school, high school kids is probably where they really would need to have a teacher, a Black teacher, because of the situations that are going on in our society today.
See more in our school system. Because I'm going to be honest, when I moved back to Olean and the realization that we had one African-American teacher in our school system, when that realization hit me, it was mind-blowing to me when I moved back to this area, and that was a truth. It was very, very astonishing to me. And trying to wrap my head around the why, I still can't find a justifiable reason. Not one that makes sense anyway, or that it has a positive reason.
So a lot of times when there are teaching positions available, it's usually somebody's parent who's a teacher and their child has graduated and they interview and they get the position. So when I say I was very lucky to be hired in the Olean City School District, I was very lucky. And I thank Mark Ward for that. I know there's some people who don't care for him, but he really didn't know who I was. He would see me in the schools and he reached out to me because I probably wouldn't even be living in this area if that was the case, if I didn't get a job in Olean. And I am talking to the superintendent about hiring more teachers of color, and he agrees that that needs to happen. He actually wants more people of color on our school board. I mean, we have a long way to go, but
so there
trying
is
to fight that fight.
Would you say that there is actually, how do I want to word this, that there's actually progression and steps being taken towards that, or is it right now just conversation? And is it conversation, is it truly positive conversation, or do you feel it's conversation of appeasement?
So it's positive conversation, and I feel like it's gonna happen. Change is gonna happen.
It's going to
Yes.
progress into action. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's at least good news. That's at least good news, because I think
It's gonna be a lot of work, but
right. Well, I think especially those of us here in Olean, we've definitely, experienced we've experienced a lot of situations where leadership around the city is like to have conversation, but they have conversation for the purpose of conversation of appeasement and not conversation of action. Unfortunately, and they have conversation for personal agenda and to check the box and not actually to make something happen. So it's encouraging to hear that there's some aspect within, within aspects of our city where people are trying to do things and make things happen. So that's definitely a positive thing. And of course, obviously, it is an uphill battle when throughout an entire school system, there is the shortage that there is, but definitely, like Steve started talking about as a trailblazer, and like we were saying, history is an ever evolving thing. History is in the moment, creation process, so to speak, and definitely the impact that you've had.
Someone asked a question on there to the school board question about how to go on, how to go about getting on the school board.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know all the details, but I can find out. There's going to be seats coming available.
You have to
soon.
You have to obtain signatures from a certain people and run and be elected, much like you do for a common council seat.
Okay.
School board.
And for those of you watching that haven't seen it yet, comments, Vernon has posted the link to the video that Michelle was talking about, the School Board of Education at St. Bonaventure video that's on YouTube. He posted that link up. And those of you that are watching, any other questions that you guys have, please throw them out there.
Corinne Potter said, great to hear there's progression happening in Olean. CA BOCES seems to have a bit of broader policy for hiring folks who are not already a part of the community. It was brought to the richness, in my opinion.
It is broader riches, in my opinion. Yeah.
So, you have traits that are two of the most hot topics right now. You're African American and you are a woman. And it's sad that I even have to say that statement, but it's true. And so we've talked a lot on this show about the Black community and racism and things like that. And specifically for this show here, what are the in this week? What are the women's rights issues you have enough to deal with in your personal life that you're working on for the school and in your career and your family and all that, but in U.S. politics and conversation with concerning topics, what is it about women's rights and women's history right now that motivates you and drives you to further change that area of our lives, your lives specifically, and your daughter's life, for her betterment? I'm very interested to hear what impacts you the most when it comes to women's rights.
Just to be treated fairly and equally. Sometimes I feel like when I'm in a room with, well, it could be females and males, like my opinion may not be valued because I'm a woman. And I'm very outspoken. I'm very blunt and to the point.
No, really?
Yes, I am. And I can sense and feel that from people. So that's something, and honestly, my daughter's the same way. And people where she works are learning that she's like that. So she's very strong, independent, and will make her ideas known. So that's something that I will always fight for, is to be heard and to be treated fairly and equally. Because my opinion matters just like your opinion matters.
As somebody like me who's a father of daughters and has granddaughters, so women's rights are very high on my priority list. If you had to give some advice to a young woman of color or not of color, of what to expect when they leave the school and go into the workforce, and some of the challenges that they're going to have, right? And then how to overcome some of them challenges, because I don't think we talk enough about that. I always talk to my daughters about this, but I don't think that we talk enough about women's challenges. We talk enough about minorities' challenges, but not enough of the challenges that women have in the workforce and being successful. So what advice would you give somebody getting ready to make that leap? And I'm pretty sure you've had this conversation with your own daughter, but you know, like what advice?
So actually we have recently had a conversation with our daughter Aaliyah about this, because she's been applying for jobs since she's graduated, and her name is Aaliyah, but it's spelled differently, like the singer her father's doing. And I feel like she's been maybe not given the opportunity she deserves, because number one, they would call her, when we go to the doctors, Alaya, Alea. So I feel like with that, her resumes will get pushed to the side. So in talking to her, we talk about following up with job applications, calling them, and just presenting yourself well. If you have an opinion about something and you can back up your opinion, back it up. Don't give up. Stand your ground Fight for what you know you deserve. And I say things at school to people, and there are people who will come to me and say, I wish I could be like you. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? They're like, you just tell people what you think and you don't care. I said, no, I'm entitled. And it's not men that do this to me. There's females that do this because it's their opinion and you're not allowed to have an opinion. Like, I work with some people like that. So, and I used to not really say anything, but then it just got to a point where, okay, this is enough. I have my own opinion. I'm allowed. You told me how you feel. Now I'm going to tell you how I feel, and this is my opinion. So there are so many people who say that to me, that they wish they could be strong and say the same things because they're always thinking them. So I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know how to help them do that other than to just let them, like, they need to speak their mind. So
that leads me, I kind of knew where you were going to go with that. So that leads me right into my second question, because I'm kind of like Dr. Harvey. I got a twofold question, right? So when do you find that when women speak their mind, right, and have an opinion, that they're looked at differently than if a man would speak his mind and have an opinion in the workforce, whether they're minorities or whether they're not? Do you find that they're looked at differently, maybe as aggressive? Are they labeled as aggressive or
I mean, I feel like I'm labeled the angry Black woman because of how I come off. But and lately I've been expressing this to people. The way I present myself, or I say things in a conversation, I'm protecting myself because I've always had to protect myself. I've always had to defend myself. So that's how it comes across. And if they feel offended by that, then they shouldn't come at me with something with not wanting my opinion. And I do feel that when, not so much in the school, but when women give their opinion, it may be thought of as an aggressive or a controlling like type situation. I did have a male administrator, and we got along great, and like he kind of understood me and he knew how I was, and like he listened and we got along just fine. But I do feel like women could be labeled as being aggressive or controlling when they're giving their opinion, or like we don't know what we're talking about. So
I appreciate the fact that, stated when you started talking about giving your opinion, you made it a point to say that it wasn't from men that you were really getting a lot of the pushback, that you were getting that from women. And even now in this example, you pointed out, yeah, I had a male administrator, but he knew me, he understood me, he would listen to me. Like, I think a lot of times, and I'm not saying that it's created a stereotype, because I know it happens. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss it and say that it doesn't happen and that, men don't label or, create these unfair situations for women, because they do, and I'm not trying to say that they don't, but I think that there are men that aren't given the credit that they're due sometimes. So I appreciate that you pointed out the fact that it is both sides sometimes, it's kind of it's a twofold battle for women. You're not just fighting men in this regard, but you're having to deal with women in this regard too. And the fact that, you're pointing out the fact that, listen, I'm just expressing my thoughts, my opinions, and ideas. It's different if I'm going off the handle and just about it, but I'm not. I'm professionally and articulate, professionally articulating my idea, my thought, my opinion. And, I heard yours, not in the mine. And, that is what should take place. That's a fair exchange. And it's unfortunate that women workforce, and not just in the workforce, but I think in general, oftentimes, women have been held to a different standard or forced to experience a different standard, I would say, in reference to that. And I do think that that's unfortunate in society. And, so that's one thing that I would say is that I appreciate that you pointed out that it's not just men that create those situations sometimes, because
Right.
I think oftentimes it is spun that it's just men that create those negative situations or negative atmospheres. So I appreciate that. Definitely.
We
I
you
Go
mind
ahead.
if I cut in?
No, go ahead.
Um, we do have to realize that each clearly each person is their own person, but each job location is its own community that kind of stacks itself over and over again into creating its own environment. And on top of that, each field of those workplaces seems to have those similar issues. So the education field may have in one district and in others, it may have similar biases and actions towards people speaking up or whatever. And so I don't know if any of you are in science or tech field working. I sort of am, but it's all dudes, and maybe that's part of the maybe that's part of the community and the what I'm talking about here. But it'd be interesting to look into data on how women feel or experience those type of things differently in the education field as opposed to a math or science field or a public works field or something like that. Or and maybe some of you may have thoughts on that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think just like did you ever watch the movie? We talked about it a few shows back, and because you had talked about your son read the book, or your wife was using that book with your son.
You cut out, but yes,
Yeah.
it's the yep.
Okay, so I think that there are specific fields that have been like male dominated for so long that that women have made unbelievable contributions in, but males have overshadowed the contribution. And those communities, like you say, yeah, those workforces, they are communities, but they've been such an unfair, like it's been designed, it's been stacked, it's been built in such an unfair way that we talk about unfair advantages, and yeah, we might be facing the same obstacles, but if I'm facing them with ankle weights and you're not, it's clearly not the same race. We're not running the same race, so to speak. And I think there are some fields that are traditionally or historically male dominated that even in today's day and age are still the same. And unfortunately, even with as much progress, much fight that women have made, they're when they speak up, when they step up, when women are making contributions and voices heard, they're still they still deal with these aggressive labels or still pushed to the side, and it's definitely unfortunate.
And I agree with you, Dr. Harvey. I think there's fields that people that are naturally dominated by men, in the same way as there's fields that are naturally dominated by women based on history and based on just who worked in them fields before. But I think there's strides being made. I see. I hope. I have hope because I have daughters and granddaughters that women continually make the strides that they're making and to get into these male dominated fields and be successful. And Michelle said something that was interesting, and I agree with her too. Sometimes it's not the men, it's the women that hold that don't want to see the women do well. And and I think that's something that can be taught early, is like let's take care of each other, women, let's make sure we're all successful. So I hope that women continually make strides in the workforce, and especially African American women in different realms, because that's one of my fears. It's, I have girls, so I want them to be just as successful as any man out here if they work hard enough at it. I don't want to hand it to them, but I want them to work for it. But if they work as hard as a man, then they should have the same opportunities. Um, there's just no way around that.
So I have a son. That's all I got. Ain't got girls, not a girl dad, not a, got a son about to graduate. And, he and I were having a conversation one day about what he wants. And when he first told me what he wanted for his life and his future, my ears almost bled, because when I heard what he wanted, I immediately thought from a negative perspective because of where my mind took it right away. So he was like, well, Dad, I want to get married. I want to have a large family. I want a nice piece of land. I want to pretty much be self-sufficient for my family. I want a large family, and I pretty much want my wife to be able to, and I didn't hear the be able. I pretty much heard, I want my wife to stay home with the kids. And so in my mind, I'm thinking he wants one of these, barefoot pregnant in the kitchen type relationships with his wife. And I'm like, bro, that's not how I raised you. Like, what is wrong with you? And so I sat down and I had this conversation with him. And he's like, no, Dad, that's not what I'm saying. He's like, I want to create a situation for my wife that if she wants to stay home, she can stay home with the kids. That if she wants to do this, wants to that, but if she wants to work, let her go to work. If she wants to go to school, go to school. If she wants to do XYZ, do this. Like, I've really tried to do my best to make sure that my son understands the value in a person, whether male or female, regardless of ethnicity or economic background or whatever the case may be. And that's one of the things that I, for a lack of better words, that I take pride in, is how I've tried to raise my son in that regard. And I think when we talk about women's history, when we talk about women's rights, when we talk about, even the things that you've shared with us and things that you've struggled with, like, I hope that my son grows up to be one of these people that continues to make a difference in the future. That he's not one of these people that's like, oh, well, tell your daughters to dress different if they don't want, guys looking at them like sexual objects. Well, no, teach your young men how to be disciplined and act like young men. Like, there's two sides to that coin. There's only not just one party that's responsible, at the end of the day. And regardless of what somebody's wearing doesn't mean you can act a certain way. Like just these certain things. And like, I just really hope that my son is able to help further somebody's rights and somebody's more than his own. Like, that's important to me, and I appreciate what you do in the city. I know since I've met you, you've had an impact on me, and I can say that most definitely. And I mean, I haven't known you a terribly long time, but in the short that I've known you, you've definitely had an impact on me already. So I can only imagine how you're having an impact in the school system. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I tried to get a Michelle Robinson student on here, but I think it's bath time. So.
Oh, Noah.
Yeah.
In the middle of trying to get that dub on Fortnite, man.
Wait,
right now.
Ezra, how did your parent-teacher conference go today?
There was two, and I didn't get to sit on either of them. One, Noah, me and Noah went somewhere and missed his, and Haley's was earlier in the day. And like, I was sick today, so.
So I presume they're doing well since no one forced.
Yeah, Haley's was
show.
like 1 minute long, I guess, and then Noah's went pretty good too.
So I just wanted to bring out some facts that perhaps some people don't know, and I didn't know all of it. If you didn't know, white women were ratified by the 19th Amendment to vote in 1920. It was signed in 1919, but they voted in 1920. And then Native American women earned the right to vote in 1924. In 1943, Chinese women were able to vote. And then not until 1965 were Black and Latina women able to vote. And so for a democratic republic, for an entire segment of the population to not have any real say in the leadership, and that only being 55 years ago, 65 years ago, sorry. I celebrate the fact that it's been 100 years since white women have been they've been voting for 100 years, but it has not been that long for your segment of the population, Michelle. And so for that and for history, I apologize. That's all. I can't do anything about it. But I do hope that this show, having you on and having you be able to speak your experience and hopefully educate and work with people who are watching or listening, and all the children that you influence in kindergarten. I just want to thank you for everything that you do and what you stand for, because it's definitely needed, and I can do my part, but you are having a much larger impact on that than I am, for sure. And maybe we'll talk again sometime to see what more I can do, because perhaps I should be doing more.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Anything else before we wrap up, Michelle?
I mean, Ezra, you haven't said one word.
No, I'm not feeling well. I was doing some research earlier, and I did see that Susan B. Anthony, I didn't know she died in Rochester, New York. So that was pretty cool when I was doing some research on that.
I didn't know that either. Did you know she got arrested for voting?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that until recently.
That's a new fact. I didn't realize she died in Rochester.
So if you were sick though, what are you doing out?
Oh,
On blast on the live.
We went to the doctors.
And you took Noah.
Yes. He has a bit of a cold too.
show us your fingers. Are they crossed?
I did have Noah as a student.
How was that?
Fine. So a little story behind that. One administrator that I had was like, "Oh, you can't teach this child because you're related." And I was like, "Okay." So I got that every year. So they'd move kids around or whatever. So Vernon started doing our family tree. And when I find out all these people I'm related to, do you know how many kids I've taught that are related to me? Because I felt like I wouldn't be biased with them. I wouldn't be fair.
Mm-hmm.
And Noah was not a difficult child, but if I had to have a conversation, I had the conversation. Currently, I have 2 kids in my classroom that are related to me, and I've had to have hard conversations. Like, that's what it's all about. I get a lot of that too, but I'm related to everybody, so there's no way I'm not going to teach somebody that's related to me. And I still want Jonah, just so you know.
You would have the smallest kindergarten class in Owen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hopefully,
Like they think they know it all, and they were like, "Oh, you can't have this one." I was like, "Okay." I would just never say anything because, like, there was no way to get around it.
someone needs to save Jonah. He's reckless.
Yeah, you used to say that about Noah, but Noah was fine at school.
See, but then you heard him outside of school too.
Right, but when I see him at school, he sits there with that smile and he's quiet. And he does his job.
That's good. Is there anything, I'm not closing, I'm not running this conversation here, but is there anything that you would say to young women, maybe in particular African American women, who may be watching or may pull this up and see it, just to, besides the advice you gave earlier, just to motivate them and encourage them to strive, or in any way, whatever in whatever way you would like to. Is there something that you could or would like to say publicly here on the record?
So actually, there are a couple of things. One would be, I would encourage, and Danny, you could do this for your daughters or your granddaughters, to buy Michelle Obama's book and have them read that. I've read that. I don't know if anybody else has read that. That's something good that young African Americans can read. And then the other thing is, if you have something a goal that you want to achieve, don't let people tell you you cannot achieve that goal, because you can. You will find the right person to help and support you. There are people out there who will say, you can't do that. If you really want to do that, and you may get discouraged, but don't get discouraged. Find a way to achieve that goal, because there is a place for you in what you want to do.
I love that. And my son just started watching Mochi and Waffles
Yeah.
this week, and I am amused by the show, certainly. And I've learned how to grow potatoes properly through the show.
We watched Ellen yesterday, and I think Michelle Obama was on Ellen yesterday talking about that. So, but
Well, if we want to, we've gone right about 50 minutes or so, and I think we're kind of coming to an end here. So if we want to go around and just kind of final thoughts, Danny, if you want to start us off with final thoughts here.
I just want to say, for National Women's Month, listen, for all the women out there, like Michelle said, don't let anybody tell you can't do anything. If you have a goal, go after it. Don't play second best to anybody, whether you're a minority woman or just a woman. Don't ever play second best to anybody. Fight for everything that you deserve. You're just as valuable as a man. You work just as hard as a man. You're just as valuable as a man. You have just as much to offer this world as any man does. And don't let anybody tell you any different. Women, hold up women. Always look for the best in women. Hold each other up and hold each other accountable to each other as well. But, believe in dreams, believe in yourself, and always never let anybody ever tell you that you're less than a man or less than anybody else, because you're just as important as anybody else walking there. A woman is a woman, and you can do the same thing anybody else can do. So always believe that, and always surround yourself with people who believe that too, because that'll make you successful. Never surround yourself with anybody that you can't do something.
Ezra.
I'll go. So to Steve's question about like what you could do now for women and women's rights, there's a bill that just got passed in the House that's going on to the Senate. So you should, everybody watching should call their state representatives and let them know to pass that voting rights bill that just passed in the House. And so call them to get it passed through the Senate. And I appreciate the conversation that you had today, explaining it, breaking it down. Because not only are you an African American, you're an African American woman, which puts you down to the bottom of the mix. So I appreciate everything that you do and that you're doing in the school district to provide equality for everyone. And I really appreciate you. So thank you for coming on tonight and for everything you do.
you're welcome.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us. I'll just wrap up by saying earlier this week, somebody posted something about it's not blacks versus whites, it's blacks versus racism. And I commented and said, it's everyone versus racism. And so many people say it's women versus men, or they say it's women versus sexism. And I say it's everyone versus sexism. And so just as Danny was, and you have been speaking to women out there, especially young women who may have thoughts that they are inferior, it is not true. And you have partners, you have friends, you have those who will stand up with you, other women as well as other men. The gentleman on here in particular would be glad to assist in any struggles concerning racism or sexism. And so I just offer that out there to let you know that there are people on your side if you're struggling with these things, and to speak up and talk to those who you confide in, so that these issues can be called out, and not for cancellation or any kind of publicity, but so that for the future, so that these problems can be solved and gotten rid of, and no one else has to deal with them. So happy National Women's History Month, and I hope to see that each one in the future increases the awareness of what is going on and what doesn't have to go on.
Any final parting words, Michelle?
I want to thank you for having me on the show. And again, I encourage young women to read Michelle Obama's book, and also to achieve that goal that you have. Don't let anybody get you down. You will find somebody that will help you reach your goal, and stay strong.
Well, again, like everyone echoed, I'll echo everyone else. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate what you do. And like I said, in the short time that I've met you, you definitely made an impact on me. And I look forward to seeing the impact that you'll have in the future, not just in the impact that I'll be able to see, but oftentimes, we plant a seed and we don't necessarily, we're not the one that gets the benefit of the shade, once the tree's grown, or, get to, swing on the branches or enjoy the fruit, or, whatever the case may be. And so it'll be interesting to see, what comes to fruition of the seeds that you plant, and the different people that you touch, and the different students that you have. And I'm thankful. You made a statement at the beginning, towards the beginning of the conversation, or when I asked you about why kindergarten, you said, hey, really, had I not gotten the job, I wouldn't even be in this area. And so I'm thankful that you planted your seed and you didn't dig it up. And, so to be able to see the impact and the things that you've been doing, and driving and trying to drive more of a diversity into the area, and addressing the issues. And, even before you got tenure, like, you didn't let that word scare you from, taking action and trying to make a difference and doing what's right. And I definitely appreciate that, and really looking forward to the things that you're going to have a hand in accomplishing, not just in this area, but just in general. It's definitely exciting. And again, I really, really appreciate it. Say something about what?
He's sick. Wait, he's sick.
Oh, okay. And I definitely appreciate that. And it's not easy. Clearly, it wasn't an easy ride. It wasn't an easy path. It wasn't an easy journey. And we appreciate your transparency. 110% appreciate you coming on and being transparent and sharing it with us. A lot of people would tiptoe around the conversation, and we appreciate the fact that you were just honest with us. So thank you very much for that. Definitely appreciate it. We do, for those of you that are in the local Olean area, and in this area, we did lose a good friend this last weekend. And so our heart goes out to the friends and family of DJ, those of you that know him. But definitely want to extend our prayers and our condolences there, and leaves behind, 3 young boys. So definitely keep them in your prayers as well. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's a celebration of life in Rochester on the 20th, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But just our prayers and thoughts definitely going out to the family there. Definitely sad. But those of you that are watching, that tuned in, we appreciate your time. Definitely wanted to take a minute and highlight Women's History Month. Feel it's important. because of the contributions that are made and that are continuing to be made. I know some of my inspirations in life have definitely been women in history and the difference that they've made. And so appreciated the time tonight, appreciated your guys' time, and we'll catch you guys next time on House Call, where we make every conversation count. Y'all have a good night.
Good night.